Atheists must borrow from the worldview. And then thirdly, and most importantly, there is no grounds for the naturalistic materials to declare anything good or evil. It is just indifferent. And I, at the end, offer you God's grace as the only remedy for that. And I really want to thank you for your patience. I really thank you for this opportunity. And I'm looking forward to your questions and answers. And again, thank you for the invitation.
Theory wouldn't mind. Anyway, you made two level sets of assertions without substantiating them. The first level being that the morality, in order to be valid for everything else below it, has to be absolute and objective. I'd like to know, well, I'd like you to list at least one specific, precise moral tenet that is one of these absolute morals that you're talking about.
Okay. And it comes, first of all, the first and I think the most important thing is it comes at the epistemological level, first of all, of grounding these things. And you're basically asking me, well, what is, well, the problem becomes, it becomes a worldview conflict, Jim. Because the worldview is, well, if I say a certain thing like justice or something like that, I mean, it's going to be the way you interpret that. And that's a worldview issue. So I would, go ahead.
That would make it not an absolute.
Oh, yes, it would. It's still absolute regardless of whether or not you accept it. That's all.
Well, but that would make the absolute morals inaccessible to flawed human being, flawed human perception, flawed human logic.
Not necessarily, because the problem becomes in is, again, is that we are still creating God, but I mean, in God's image, but we have the residue of the image of God. We have a conscience. In Romans 2, it talks about that even the Gentiles who didn't have the Decalogue, who did not have the law of God, still had enough of a conscience in order to what is right and wrong. And we do see common morality throughout. I think this is something that Dan alluded to in his opening statement, is the fact that there are just certain things. I mean, Bertrand Russell had this problem, and he said it was very despairing that he could not find a moral rudder, and it depressed him. He said to live ethically, so I could give you justice, don't murder, and everything else, and in every single case you can find exceptions to that, but just because there are exceptions to that rule doesn't mean that the rule then becomes irrelevant or it becomes contradicted.
I didn't mean irrelevant.
Okay.
I meant, from what you said,
sure,
that it has to be interpreted. If it has to be interpreted, its absoluteness is not accessible.
Not necessarily, no. Because objective transcendent, even if I misinterpret it, it's still objective and still stands strong. I mean, I can misinterpret the law of gravity, jump out the window, and still fall down.
I understand the absolute might be there, but useless to us if it's inaccessible.
Okay, but then the problem becomes, too, is if we're going to live in a pure agnosticism, then we can't declare anything.
We don't have to declare an absolute. We
must declare an absolute, because how are you going to apply that in any type of working manner? Because if we are flawed human beings, how can we know anything at all?
Easy. I live under the laws of Onondaga County. Okay. I can live under the moral set that Onondaga County and the rest of humanity.
But that's based on pure skepticism. That's the problem. Are you skeptical of your own skepticism?
I am indeed.
Okay.
I often wonder whether that's the best way to understand the world.
But the best way I can say this is just to kind of sum it up, and I'm not trying to throw punches at you. The thing of it is this, that there must be an objective transcendent for all human beings, because then if everything is a matter of personal preference, then why are we here?
Okay. I'm not saying personal preference. I'm saying the society's understanding in bulk, and the broadest.
So you're going to appeal to human consensus?
Not necessarily human consensus, but because sometimes the actual outcomes, the actual results of moral behavior or immoral behavior are not accurately known. So consensus is not perfect either.
Okay.
But what it gets you is the best available working moral set.
That's, you see, again...
Only because the absolute ones aren't available.
But you're saying that, but you're still declaring an absolute within a relative framework, because you're still saying these laws are the best that we know, but then you're saying on the other hand that you can't know.
Absolute is the best. It's not perfect.
Okay.
So, and the second piece of that,
okay,
of the question, is the next layer up.
Sure.
That it has to be a transcendent being.
Yeah.
No, wait a minute. It has to be an all-knowing transcendent being.
Absolutely.
Oh, wait a minute. What I really mean is God. Your God is the only source of the absolute moral system.
He's God. He's not my God. He just happens to be my God because I accepted him, but it's not my morality either.
It's your God only in the sense, I'll grant, that other people have different ones.
Okay, but the problem becomes, the issue becomes, again, is without an absolute set of standards, right and wrong cannot be determined. There can't be moral relativism just doesn't work, because the problem is we try to get it again from, let's say we try to get it again from nature. The problem is how can impersonal forces invoke personal morality?
Oh, that's as simple as how come mathematics exists.
No, not at all. Those are two different questions. I mean, I'm asking you, how can something that we observe in nature tell me how to behave?
How can it?
Without grounds, there must be ground in a being, because personal ethics demand a personal moral lawgiver.
It's the logic of consequences.
Okay. So
and
you're
that's like
okay.
Mathematics.
No.
It doesn't have to come from anywhere.
Okay.
But the other part about whose God it was, just this is not a question. This is personal opinion.
Sure.
When you hit Jesus, you go off the rails basically.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. And yeah, just as Dan said, I think too, just keep it down to a question. I'll do my best to answer it as well. Okay.
You're getting Jim. I'm another Jim.
Okay. So Jim number 2.
My question, I think, or comment ties in to Jim's.
Okay.
And that is, frankly, you confused me more than once. But you confused me by confusing God with Christ. You talked a lot about God, but then you made your pitch at the end to go to Christ. Now, why can't I imagine an imam talking about the God of the universe from his perspective, and it gets to Jim's question, which God?
That's correct.
If God is the God of the universe, which God? The Buddhist God, the Christian God, the Jewish God, the Islam God, and why should I choose any of these based on a straw house called the Bible, which has historically been proved? You know, so you're starting from an assumption that's built on a straw house.
Okay. Well, let me just try to best answer. That's why I debate people of other religions and do open forums and so on. First of all, we can check the books. We have to have, again, I agree with in terms of reason, but I believe that reason comes from basically that when Thomas Aquinas, for example, gave his cosmological argument, that natural law came from the law of God. So again, the question becomes which God, which is a reasonable question, comes in the form of, well, which God or which thing, and I can deal with the Bible in just a second, best corresponds to reality as we know it. We can look at some of the creation epics of certain gods and just dismiss them. Now, Islam, for example, heavily contradicts Scripture in the sense that, and then at the same time claims in other times to go to the people of the book, and that they should never be disputed. But then the problem is there's a doctrine in Islam called the law of abrogation, where certain surahs and certain books written at a later time can override them. But the question is easy. We have a rationale put into us by God, which I would call reason. So I have no problem with that part, where we can reason in terms of what epic best corresponds to reality. Now, here's the problem with this, is human beings, we're finite in knowledge. We are finite in the sense that we